What if there's any indelible memory that stands out in your mind about Stan? What would it be?
Well, he was just an amazing player. We were very close to the same age, but he was way ahead of me. So I learned a lot from him. I was always amazed at the blend that he and Jimmy Rainey got together. They sounded like one instrument that you couldn't really tell what it was sometimes. And then when Brookmeyer joined the group, he changed his sound a little bit to blend with the trombone. But he always had that beautiful sound of his, the Long Island sound, they called it.
What does that mean, the Long Island sound?
Well, he lived in Long Island at the time.
Right. But I mean, like, what was character? I mean, I grew up in Long Island, but I mean, can you break that down, or was it just merely attributed?
Well, that was just a nickname that somebody hung on him. He had a unique, beautiful sound, and that was what somebody called it.
Can you talk about how you actually linked up originally with Stan?
Well, that first gig was in Boston. It was a week at the Hi-Hat, and Roy Haynes was living up there already, so Stan had hired him, and a piano player that I had met before from Pittsburgh named Jerry Kaminsky, who was a lovely piano player, very much like Hank Jones. And it was odd, he didn't think anybody liked the way he played, even though you could tell him over and over again. He didn't believe he really liked the way he played.
Wow, he was just really doubted himself. He didn't believe in himself?
He was down on himself.
Oh, that's too bad.
He ended up drinking himself to death.
Wow.
But he only stayed for that 1 week, and then he left, and Duke Jordan came on the quintet. So, and Frank Isola was the drummer.
Sure. But essentially, your connection to Stan, had you met him prior, or Jimmy Rainey was your connection?
I just met him to say hello once. The drummer that brought me to New York from Seattle, named Buzzy Bridgeford, knew all these guys. He'd been in New York for a while, and so Stan was one of the guys I met. Just hey Bill, this is Stan Getz, oh hi, and it was somebody to say hello to. There were a number of those guys that I just knew from having been introduced, and would say hello whenever I saw them. It's funny, Neil Hefti was one of those guys. Dave Lambert introduced me to him, and a couple of years, maybe just a year or so later, I'd been saying hello to him every time I saw him at Charlie's Tavern, and Dave hired me for a demo that Neil was doing for his wife, Frances Wayne. He wanted a vocal group, so I was singing baritone in the vocal group. And we walked into the studio, and Neil says hi to Dave, and Dave says, and you know Bill Crow. And he says, Bill Crow, then who's Rue Moore? He thought he'd been saying hello to Rue.
Oh, wow. If he had known that it was Bill Crow, would he have said still said hi to you?
At that time, my name didn't mean anything to anybody.
Can you, from a technical point of view, explain how hard it is, like you mentioned before, the blending of Getz's sound of his horn with Jimmy's guitar, that they could clash, but they didn't? How did they do that so well?
Well, it was just, they were playing unison lines, some of them quite complicated. Jimmy wrote some nice lines sometimes. And Stan just blended with Jimmy. He tried to get a sound that matched Jimmy's sound. And so that the unison, they played so perfectly in unison together that it sounded like one guy,
Do you feel like that was like one of his leadership qualities, in the sense of adjusting to other members of the band? I mean, what could you speak to as far as you were in his working group for 6 months?
Yeah, well, he messed around with heroin, and when he was stoned, he was one guy, and when he was sober, he was another guy. When he was playing, he was one guy. When he was doing business deals, sometimes he would be a little sharper than you had expected, you know. But
could you give an example of something where you witnessed his different personalities? Because this is a very important part of his life story.
Well, I knew a lot of guys that were messing around with junk in those days, and most of them, when they got high, they would get passive. They'd just get quiet or maybe fall asleep.
Sure.
But Stan would get evil. The horns would come right out. Wow. He would do mean things to people that he didn't do when he was sober. He didn't treat women well, and he was very attracted to women. He was a handsome guy, and he was a star. And several women that I met who were attached to Stan, including his wife at the time, all were crazy about him, and I didn't think that he was treating any of them very well.
Like it was like a combination, like where he would in public verbally and physically abuse them?
Yeah, or just be inconsiderate or mean, or actually that first week when I met him, he at the hotel, he said, "I'm going to be your roommate, but I'm not going to be living there. I just want to put my name on the register as living in your room with you. Is that okay?" And I said, "Okay. What's the deal?" He said, "Well, I got a chick upstairs that I'm staying with." Okay. So a couple of days later, his wife decides to surprise him and come up and visit for the weekend. And there was another girl that was hanging around that he was also romancing. So one night at the club, there's a table right in front of the bandstand, and his wife and two girlfriends were sitting there, each one thinking that she's the one he's with. And he managed to juggle that whole thing and still play the night. You know?
And he still had to play how many sets that night? I mean, so he really was, but that didn't faze him at all. But was there a more caring side when he was sober, or was he? Or
yeah, he was a nice boy when he was sober, and a couple of times I've seen pictures of him with his kids. And well, actually, we lived in Levittown at that time, and he had two young boys. And sometimes he would be a little too loaded to drive himself home, so he'd ask me to. I was living by myself in the village at the time. I would drive him home to Levittown, stay overnight, have breakfast with them, and then take the train home. And that was okay with me because I didn't have anything else to do.
Sure.
And I liked Beverly. She was a nice girl. Actually, she was the sister of Buddy Stewart, who had been Dave Lambert's partner before he was killed in an auto accident. And so through Dave, we had a good connection, Beverly and I. And she was always glad to see me, and we had a nice time chatting and all that anytime I stayed out there. And the kids were nice, and Stan was nice with the kids. And, he played that role quite nicely, I thought, as a husband at home in Levittown.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Bev has sort of initiated this with this film producer. She's given her blessing, but she does want an honest portrayal of...
Oh, the daughter you're talking about.
I guess it's his daughter. So he had a sister. You're talking about his sister.
No. I mean, his first wife was named Beverly. That's where the daughter's name came from.
Oh, I see. Okay, so and his wife has since passed, but the daughter's still alive. So Bev, But Bev talks about him as, even though you saw him at breakfast and he played that role, she said he was somewhat barbaric at times and not the best father. But so
But the original wife, Beverly, ended up becoming a junkie because she was trying to figure out a way to stay in Stan's game, and it really ruined her life. She got very ill and ended up getting killed in an auto accident, I think.
Wow.
It wasn't a pretty story.
Tom, can you talk about the high point of playing with that quartet with Kluk on drums? Can you talk about some seminal moment playing with that group? Was that that must have been a ball.
Well, that first week was like a very heavy learning experience for me because I'd only been playing the bass a short time, and Jimmy Rainey was teaching me all of Stan's repertoire, and I was just trying to stay with him, But I liked playing with Roy Haynes, and I liked playing with Jerry Kaminsky. That was a really nice rhythm section, I thought. And then when they didn't stay with the band, and the next band was Duke Jordan and Frank Isola, I loved both of them. I thought they played just exactly right for Stan. And Duke Jordan would play introductions that were such gorgeous little compositions sometimes that you hated to come in and play the tune.
When you say they played well for Stan, can you unpack that exactly? Because I'm not the most...
Well,
yeah.
They found a way of supporting him rhythmically and harmonically that let him do what he did well, He had a nice time. But somebody asked him one time who his ideal tenor player would be, and he said, Al Cohen's ideas suit Sim's time and my technique. And he told me one time, he said, I've never had any trouble playing anything I can think of. He said, the hard thing is thinking of stuff to play. And he always admired Al Cohen so much because Al was such a fountain of original ideas. And I know when Al died, Stan got on the phone just before he passed and apologized to him for not doing more for him because he had taken so much of his material and used it,
He took a lot of Al Cohen's material?
It's just his ideas. Our jazz musicians do that. You hear something good, you use it,
But he was like but he never really acknowledged that to Al.
He felt that he could have done more for Al. He was sort of in competition with him as a tenor player, But that was his guilt trip, but Al wasn't really interested in hearing that,
Well, especially on his, as he was, on his last legs. But people seem to want to please him, Stan, quite a bit. His wife got to the point of getting into heroin to try to save her marriage or get on his wavelength. That's...
Yeah, sure. Well, I saw him. There was a druggist in Washington, D.C. that loved Stan and would do anything for him except give him hard drugs. And he would give him vitamins and sometimes even Dexedrine or something like that if he was having trouble staying awake for the gig. And he kept his cars for him when he wasn't using them to tour. And then Stan ended up stiffing him for some money or some dumb thing, just to show him that he could. That was the evil side of it.
Yeah, a lot of. Was he ever outwardly?
He would make passes at the musicians' wives, and then go tell them if he was successful. know, just
He'd go tell
because
he'd go tell the musician that he just hit on his wife.
Yeah, yeah. Just part of his attitude that women are no damn good,
Wow. Was he ever outwardly? Was he? Did he treat you like badly at any point?
He treated me very well. He used me a lot, I drove him home a lot, and I helped save his life one night when he overdosed. But
can you talk about that?
well, just I was riding with him from a job up in the Bronx, and instead of going straight to my house where he was supposed to drop me off, he wanted to stop off at a friend's house where there was a party. And I said, okay. And so we stopped off, and of course the party was guys getting high in the basement. I didn't know that. And but I went downstairs looking for him, and he says, oh, I'm just going to do up this one little more taste. And he did, and immediately stopped breathing, started turning blue, fell on the floor. So the three of us were giving him artificial respiration and finally getting him back to breathing. And then he looked up at his friend Blackie and said, get off of me, you're getting my clothes all dirty. Blackie says, man, you were dead. And Stan thinks about that for a minute and said, well, I bet I'm higher than you are.
Wow. Wow. So you gave him CPR, artificial respiration? I mean, what role did you play? Did you actually resuscitate him?
Pressing on his chest while other people were blowing in his mouth and pulling his tongue aside and all that sort of thing.
Unbelievable. That is Bill Crow blowing my mind. By the way, you're one of the most. I mean, the way you play bass is also like the way you deliver stories. That first interview was just so gliding and smooth. So very. You got a good brain there, man. You're doing really. But in stepping back as a musician, playing this music. Was Stan respected by the African American jazz community?
Well, I don't really know about the community. I know that certain guys admired him and respected him. Other guys thought he was racist and didn't trust him at all.
Who respected him? I mean, Coltrane has some quotes about him, but I mean, like you play with Diz and a host of other cats.
Yeah, well, he could play. It was just a lot of people had a lot of bad experiences with him aside from the playing. So I don't think anybody denied the fact that he could play, but he wasn't. In a lot of ways, he wasn't trustworthy, But the only bad thing he ever did to me was to fire me without notice, and that was just because, he apologized for that, but it was that he needed to hire Teddy before they started a road trip. He didn't want to get me out into Kansas City or someplace and then have to pay my way home. So I understood that, and I was disappointed, but I understood it.
Well, so, but they thought he was racist. I mean, did he use a lot of racist language and terminology and stuff? I mean, why would they say?
I never heard any of that, but I know that Clark Terry, for one, didn't have any use for Stan. And I worked with Clark a lot, and that was certainly the impression I got, was that he felt that Stan was racist and jive about
it, like he just didn't treat Clark well, or he just overtly was just right in his face?
Well, he may have just said something at some time that was the wrong thing, but
do you feel like? Yeah, no, I did. No, I dig. I dig. I mean, you're this is like all I can tell you is like very possibly we might be coming back to do something on camera with you at some point. This thing is lining up really well. I'm talking to Stanley Clark next week, and but I was going through all my transcripts and I realized that you had gigged with him, and I just looking at it from your point of view, what do you think his what did he bring to the war? Did he bring Brazilian music to the United States, or was that Charlie Bird?
No, Charlie Bird was the one that brought it, and he invited Stan to come make the record with him, and Stan just took it from there. He didn't take Charlie along with him.
So can you explain that though? What did he mean? He took it from there. Did he take advantage of that at that point?
Well, I mean, he had the star quality is really what it was, and everybody responded to that. And the disc jockeys and the bookers and all of that were interested in Stan because of the way he sounded on that record. The same thing happened when Stan first hit, when he had that solo on Early Autumn with Woody. He was off the band and gone by the time that record came out, but it made him a star and gave him the opportunity to book jazz clubs with his own group, and he never really had to do anything that he didn't want to do musically because he had that star quality. He was good looking, and the sound of his horn was very attractive.
Bill, I will let you know if any of this. We're gonna, at least the producer's gonna meet with Herb Albert in about a month for some backing, and if we're gonna use any of this in the quote unquote sizzle video to elicit some excitement, I'm gonna let you know in advance. But I really appreciate you taking the time, man.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Talk to you soon, Bill.
Okay.
Bye.